Hello everyone, welcome to the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Harry Reagan. Tonight, an oral history recording with one of Jacksonville's broadcasting pioneers. Bob Schellenberg was sales manager and general manager at WJXT TV4. Here's our interview with Bob Schellenberg. You came to Channel 4 in the 60s?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
62.
Mm-hmm.
I came down here from Washington with my family. It's a side story for that. My mother-in-law had told my wife that I would never like it, so don't worry about it. You're moving to Jacksonville because he's going to come back after that visit and tell you he hates it. The reverse was true. I came down, loved it, said it was going to be a great place to raise children, and obviously convinced my wife that was the case. And so my mother-in-law and I didn't speak for a couple of weeks, but we got along pretty well. But it was...
and it turned out to be a good decision. I mean, you've enjoyed living in Jacksonville all these years.
I clearly did. And for the reason I came down here, you know, for the job, of course, but for raising children, it was nothing better. The children were able to ride bikes to school, and it was just an all-around good experience for us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with our volume of children, it was important to make sure that they were safe and sound.
And you were here at a very important period when Channel 4 was really taking off.
It had begun to do that until we reached a point of dominance in this marketplace that really is unknown today. I mean, it could never happen today, I don't think.
This is, need we remind people, before cable.
Oh yeah, it was when this was a 4-station market.
Yeah.
It was a 3-station market for a while, and finally we had a 4th station. But when a 4th station came on, and we were still on our local, excuse me, our local news had a 60% share. I mean, to look at that in today's numbers, it would be totally unrealistic.
What would today's numbers be, just to
somewhere in the 20s, if you got, I mean, if you were in a powerhouse. But I used to think it was a great thing for CBS to know, but some people in Washington said, don't make a big deal out of that, and I couldn't understand why, frankly, because we delivered more to Walter Cronkite than anybody else in the country, with a share of audience, not total audience, of course. But that led to our familiarity with Walter Cronkite. And Walter came down, as you remember, on the birthday of Bill Grove and his anniversary. We had a big party, and Walter doesn't do those things, by the way, or didn't do those things. And we persuaded him, and CBS was very helpful in persuading him to come down and be our keynote speaker, and it was a huge success. And Walter at that point was, without question, there was an NBC pair that was very popular, but Walter still dominated the marketplace.
That pair being Huntley and Brinkley.
Huntley and Brinkley, correct. Right.
And then there was ABC, which was not even on the radar screen, basically.
No, not at that point, no.
Yeah. So, now, part of Channel 4's dominance may be attributed, I suppose, to the fact that they had a 10-year head start. They were on the air about 10 years before anybody else.
Sure.
But I wouldn't venture that that's the only factor.
Nor would I.
They were doing some other things right.
I think so.
Yeah.
We implemented the CBS programming with other programming, and of course, the one thing that, I guess the keynote of this whole station, I guess people here that have come in later years really don't understand the dominance of our news department and our investigative report and our editorial policy. Those 3 things combined gave people the opportunity of getting the news that they knew was accurate and timely, editorials that gave them a position, strong position, as you know, on issues we thought they should be discussing, that had a debate in the marketplace that made a difference in their futures. And then investigative reports, which were very important.
Now, another factor here, this is an oral history interview, so we have to be as accurate as we can be. And there was a kind of journalism vacuum created by a, shall we say, less than excellent newspaper. Actually, two newspapers. There was an afternoon paper. But the railroad-owned newspapers were not willing to do much journalistic in terms of investigative reporting and so forth.
Well, I think that clearly was a problem, and our competition at that point in television were not interested in doing editorials nor investigative reporters, so that marketplace was totally ours. We owned that marketplace. And with the newspaper, as weak as it was, in a sense weak, it had good circulation, but it was not a news paper. It was a good comic page. It had good sports, but from the standpoint of being editorially prominent, it wasn't.
And Channel 4 is credited, we're not just beating our own drum here.
Sure we are.
Channel 4 is credited with bringing about one of the most important things that ever happened in Jacksonville, the consolidated government, with Norm Davis and Bill Grove.
No question. Well, you point that out, and that's clearly when you're instrumental in changing the government form, you've made an enormous step forward in the progress of the people of Jacksonville.
Now, I want to ask you, you came out of sales.
Exactly.
And there would have been some apprehension, I think, at the point where you became general manager.
Clearly.
And yet, my perception was always that there was a firewall between sales and news, and there was never any attempt even to influence news judgment from the sales department.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because shortly before I became general manager, there was an article published in either Time or Newsweek, and the source was an Atlanta source, which pointed out that exactly the opposite of what you just said had happened, that a leading citizen of Jacksonville had talked to the sales department and threatened them with reduction of their advertising budget if they hadn't killed a story. The salesperson involved, according to the story, went down to the news department and pleaded with them to kill the story. Well, that never happened. I wouldn't have let it happen, but all the threats that I said, that if any one of the salesmen did that, he was out. He was out the door. I mean, their job was to market advertising, not news.
But I would assume that some of the people in your sales department might have been unhappy from time to time with what was being done by the news department.
Very unhappy, because there were a lot of the prime targets of some of the investigative reports were some of the largest advertisers we had on the station.
So threatening to cancel advertising?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there was no place to go. Clearly, now that sounds egotistical, but the point is that we were so dominant in the marketplace, they could threaten all they wanted to.
So that gave you a tremendous advantage.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a boost to know that, and some of them did reduce their schedules. I remember one, clearly we made a decision on how advertising was to be sold. And our biggest advertiser said, I won't do it. Well, if we had gone along with them, our whole advertising concept would have destroyed. So we said, no, I'm sorry, that's not the way it's going to be. It took them about a month to come back.
And you managed to shift your outlook, realizing that you had this job as general manager that was going to be different
Clearly.
Compared to sales manager.
Sure, it's you have to. The only difference, or the difference, is that you're selling something. You're selling the station as a whole, or you're selling an individual, or as an advertising slogan. So I looked on the general manager's job as trying to organize all of the people in all of the departments to be as enthusiastic about the station as the salespeople had to be.
And news was, and I suppose still is, a major sales tool.
No question.
That you were selling the fact that this was a dominant news department that was doing stuff that people could not afford to miss. They had to tune in at 6 o'clock to see what was going on.
We were the water cooler conversation the day after. If you didn't watch editorials or you didn't watch our news, the conversation in offices around the city would have come to a dreadful halt. Because we were the thing that motivated people to discuss issues and to make decisions.
You're watching an interview with broadcaster Bob Schellenberg on the Jacksonville History Show. Our interview will continue in just a moment.
The Jacksonville Historical Society, preserving your city's history, protecting your city's treasures, advocating the restoration of Jacksonville landmarks, archiving a century of historical documents, collecting rare photographs, tens of thousands, creating the Merrill Museum House, piece by piece, restoring Old St. Andrew's Church, receiving Florida Historical Society's top honors, publishing historical books, elegantly crafted, producing video histories, dramatically told, educating our citizens for decades, enlightening the generations to come, sponsoring tonight's special television presentation, and offering you the opportunity to become a part of Jacksonville history. Call 665-0064, visit jackshistory.com, and become a member of the Jacksonville Historical Society, celebrating 80 years serving our community.